In his youth, Dave worked as a forester. He thought it would always be like this. He enjoyed the job. Why wouldn't he? His grandfather had been a forester, and so had his father. Dave lived, worked, and thought, once he gets married, he'll have a son who will also become a forester. He would teach him everything, the various intricacies of the work. If he took the boy into the forest from childhood, just like his father had taken him, he would understand everything from a young age. Such simple and straightforward dreams Dave had. Time passed, and Dave chose a bride for himself, from among his own, from the village. She was quiet and modest. Rumors circulated in the village that she was adopted and came from an orphanage. So what? Wasn't she a person? Her parents loved her, and she was a good person. Dave thought, we'll live well. Once I finish my military service and return, we'll have our wedding. But as they say, man proposes, and God disposes. Now, Dave had to come to terms with the fact that he would have no son. Never again would he have one. And he had to give up his beloved job. He had to find work in the city where the salary was higher. He and his wife really needed the money now. Everything would be fine, but Dave missed the forest terribly, though he didn't show it so as not to upset his wife. The only solace he found was walking through the forest to the station to go to work in the city. But that was just to ease his soul, to breathe in the fresh air, and that was all. There was no time to wander aimlessly in the forest. There was so much to do at home. His wife was paralyzed, so he had to do everything himself, the chores around the house and in the garden. The only thing Dave allowed himself was to collect trash when he returned home from the station, passing by the pioneer camp. That camp drove him crazy. Not the camp itself, of course. The camp was a good thing. Let the kids rest and interact with nature. What annoyed Dave the most were the camp counselors who didn't keep an eye on the children, allowing them to throw all sorts of trash over the fence. They also contributed to the littering quite a bit. Dave loved nature dearly and couldn't just walk past without tidying up the forest. If only he were a forester like before, he would have set those counselors straight. He would have quickly resolved the issue with the camp director and put everyone in their place. But he had no authority now, so he had to stay silent and pick up the trash himself. So today, Dave was returning home from work. It was getting dark, it was August, and the nights were already cool, so much so that cold and dampness began to creep in as soon as the sun touched the treetops. Dave looked and saw that there was once again a pile of wrappers, plastic bottles, and other trash behind the camp fence. What kind of pigs are these? Why can't they take their trash to the dump? Why throw it here? Dave approached, noticing that the village dogs had already been at work during the day. They had scattered the sweet wrappers around. He pulled out a bag from his pocket, it was always prepared just in case, and began to gather the pile. He cleaned it up and continued picking up more trash. It seemed litter was scattered throughout the entire forest. He didn't realize how deep he had gone into the thicket. It was also getting dark. Suddenly, he heard a sobbing sound. Was it a child? Dave looked around. On a fallen tree sat an unexpected surprise, two little girls huddled close together, shivering from the cold. They were dressed only in light sundresses with thin straps, just like two peas in a pod. Dave immediately realized they must have come from the camp. Don't be afraid, let's sneak off to pick some raspberries, and you got lost, Dave thought. And the counselors probably aren't paying attention to the kids. They're probably caught up in their own affairs. Well, just wait, I'll deal with you. Dave decided. This will be a lesson for them. He took off his cloak and draped it over the girls. Are you lost? He asked. The girls nodded silently. My name is Uncle Dave. Don't be afraid. I used to work as a forester here. Let's go to my place. I live not far from here, behind the mill. The girls climbed down from the tree, wiping their tears. They walked around the mill, and soon Dave brought them to his home, the last house in the village. They went inside. Dave seated the girls at the table and poured them some hot tea. As he did, he thought, for now, I'll keep them here. I'll see when they're missed at the camp. Then I'll make the counselors clean up the entire forest before I return the girls. But something about the girls troubled him. They were quite small, not at all like the camp kids who were usually older. By their faces, the girls looked to be about 5 years old at most. Well, it doesn't matter, Dave decided. We'll see. What are your names? He asked. Kelly and Lilith, they answered in unison. He never figured out which of them was Kelly and which was Lilith. Okay, I'll sort it out later, thought Dave. At that moment, the phone rang. He stepped outside to talk. It was his workplace calling. They needed him to return urgently due to some emergency. Well then, beautiful Kelly and Lilith, make yourselves comfortable. I need to step out for work. I hope it won't be long. But don't be afraid, no one will bother you here. And no one visits us anymore, the villagers rarely come around. Just don't go into the next room. My Jessica is lying there, she's very sick, so don't disturb her. The girls nodded in sync again. Dave smirked. I wonder if twins always do things the same way, or do they have their differences sometimes? As he walked to the station, a dreadful thought flashed through his mind. What if I hadn't found them on that log? The temperature drops close to 0 at night. They would have frozen to death. Ah, I wish I could find out who left them unattended. No, I can't let this go. When I get back from work, I'll go to the camp with the police officer tomorrow to sort this out. For something like this, they need to be held accountable. It was completely dark outside. Dave walked along the path to the train station, lost in memories, how he once strolled through these same places with Jessica when they were just getting to know each other. Dave had worked in the forest since he was a child. Village boys start early if they're good at it. Some drive tractors, others drive combines. His father took Dave into the forest to distant boundaries from the age of 8, teaching him all the intricacies. When his father's sciatica flared up, Dave was already capable of replacing him at work. Although they thought back then that it was just sciatica. His mother rubbed and warmed his father's back on the advice of local doctors and healers, but it turned out to be much more serious. In reality, Dave's father didn't have back problems, he had kidney issues. But who knew? When Dave was 16, his father passed away, renal failure. That's when Dave began working as a forester himself. He managed just as well as his father and grandfather. It was during that period that he set his sights on Jessica. He found her attractive, and that was that. He often invited her to the forest, telling her about trees and herbs, explaining everything to her. Jessica listened with interest and smiled. She was a good girl. Dave made up his mind, she would be his wife. Either her or no one else. That's how he was. Village boys mature quickly and understand things better, unlike immature city boys, whose mothers wipe their noses until they're 35. At 16, Dave already knew perfectly well what he wanted, how he would live, and what kind of girl he needed for a wife. But he didn't plan to rush Jessica. He wanted everything to happen in a proper way. First, he would serve in the army, and then they would have their wedding. He had seen too many people rush into marriage, only to go off to the army 2 months later and return as a different person. They live, argue, and divorce. And if children appear by then, they suffer too, running around the village like orphans even with their parents alive. No, Dave thought, there's a reason for sending people to the army. You serve your country and test your feelings. Dave was confident in his feelings for Jessica. His love had not diminished at all over the 2 years. He had no doubts about her feelings either. But it was one thing to be together every day in the village and quite another to test their love over a distance. That's what the army would show, he thought. He vividly remembered how he was seen off to the army. His mother, of course, cried, and Jessica stood nearby, also with tear-filled eyes. She promised to write, and she really did, almost every day for the first 6 months. Then the letters stopped. Dave asked his mother what was going on with Jessica, but she remained silent. Well then, Dave thought, I guess I was mistaken. He didn't lose his mind like some people did. He decided for himself, since Jessica had stopped writing, the test was passed. What was the point of running away from the army if she had betrayed him? Running away wouldn't change anything. Dave didn't plan to do anything to himself, unlike others. There was a guy in his platoon who found out that his girlfriend had left him and shot himself in the head. He missed and lost an eye. Dave thought, what did that achieve for him? Even if he got that girl back, what would be the point? Someone who betrayed once would betray again. Why live with a person like that and fear new infidelities every day? Dave was not like that. He was determined and sensible. The truth was, Jessica didn't marry someone else. His mother would have definitely written about that. She just stopped writing. Why, no one knew. Dave decided he would figure it out himself as soon as he got back. And so, when he returned from the army, he immediately went to Jessica's house, to her parents. Although the village said her parents were adoptive, Dave didn't care. Parents are parents, adoptive or not. Let them explain how they lost their daughter at the doorstep. Dave was greeted by her father, who glanced into his eyes briefly and then looked away. Jessica is no more, he said, and started to cry. How can that be? Dave almost lost consciousness. Just like that, she's gone, said her father. See for yourself. Dave entered the house, and there she lay on the bed, staring at a spot on the ceiling. She didn't seem dead, but she wasn't alive either. Her mother was bustling around, adjusting something. Jessica is paralyzed, her mother said. She can't move at all. How is that possible? Nobody knows. Such a misfortune happened. I told her not to walk around the old mill, all sorts hang around there. But she insisted, it's a shorter way home from the station. And it goes right past Dave's house. I look at his windows and feel like I'm meeting him, said her father, wiping away another tear. I don't know who did this to her. And the doctors? What do the doctors say? Dave asked. And what do they say? What doctors do we have here? They buried your father when he was still young. They just shrugged their shoulders, said his mother. So, just like that, Jessica is gone. Is this really Jessica? She's like a vegetable, her father said sternly. God didn't give us our own children, so he took away someone else's. Dave sat on the stool his mother had set up for him. He needed to collect himself, to regain his composure. He expected anything from Jessica, that she no longer loved him, or that she had met someone else. He even thought maybe she got pregnant and had a child. He was ready for anything, even to accept someone else's child if that were the case. But he definitely didn't expect this. And what to do now? Live? Go to a disco, meet someone else, get married? And Jessica would be lying here, his beloved Jessica. That's not right, it won't do. This isn't the life he dreamed of. It's inhumane. Listen, Dave said firmly as he got up from the stool, I won't allow you to bury her before her time while she's still alive. So we'll fight. Yes, I'll get married, as I promised. So get ready, future relatives. Why don't you just get out of here, kid? And don't mock our grief. Why do you need her like this? There are plenty of healthy girls running around the village. Pick any of them and leave us alone. Jessica's mother leaned toward Dave. The doctor said she won't be able to have children after this, you understand? What do you want her for? Find another. Well, that's not for you to decide, Dave replied just as firmly. I said I'd get married, so I will. Of course, they didn't have a lavish wedding. They invited the chairman of the village council and the secretary to their home and just signed the marriage certificate. When they asked, do you take Jessica as your wife, she could only blink her eyes. Everyone took that as a yes. And that was it, they were married. Dave put a ring on Jessica's finger and hung his own on a chain. What did she need jewelry for? Who knew? After the wedding, Dave took her home. At that time, he had already brought his mother to live with him. His sister had taken her there since her health wasn't great. That's how they all lived, Dave and Jessica. Her adoptive parents visited a few times, checked in to see everything was fine with them, saw that Jessica was doing okay, and then left them alone. Let them live as they wanted. If they were happy. Of course, Dave worried that they had no children and probably never would, as the doctor said. But he naturally didn't show Jessica any sign of this. One thing remained unclear: what happened to her? They found her in such a state right by the old mill. Not long after the wedding, Jessica began to speak. Sometimes she would say only a few words, and those would often be unclear. Dave wanted to ask her what had happened, but he quickly thought better of it. What if something terrible occurred? Why stir up memories? After all, it wouldn't affect her recovery at all. What happened, happened. It was all in the past, Dave decided. As we mentioned before, he had to give up his job as a forest ranger. He needed money for examinations in the city, and better yet, abroad, but the ranger's salary was small. So Dave got a job at a factory in the city. Of course, it wasn't a great paying job either, but it was enough to live on. Plus, they could save a little to set aside. Thus, it turned out that Dave didn't find any children in the woods. Life was still a strange thing, he thought. God doesn't give children to some, while others abandon them in the forest. They might have gotten lost, of course, but it was already night, and no one had come looking for them. Rescuers and the police should have been digging around the area by now if these were children from the camp. Someone must have noticed, yet no one seemed to care. And little girls for a camp. What happened to them? That work call came at the worst possible time. He needed to ask the girls who they were and where they came from. Kelly and Lilith. Lilith and Kelly. What a coincidence. Maybe it was some kind of sign of fate, twins. He would gladly take them in for upbringing. Dave, of course, wanted a boy, like all men do, but having a girl is good too. And 2 girls? Then he remembered how his wife once asked him, "Who would you choose if I had a twin sister?" Just like me, identical. Why would I need to choose? I've already made my choice, Dave smiled back then. What if she were normal, not like I am now? Jessica asked. I'd still choose you. You're my one and only, unique, Dave replied and kissed her. Just imagine that you're not the only one, Jessica insisted. I remember, an orphanage. Just a little. It's strange, but it's like I had a twin. But you were adopted at 3 years old. What can you remember? Dave was surprised. I hardly remember anything until summer, just how my father taught me to ride a bike and how I fell from an apple tree. He treated me with nettles afterward. Why nettles? Because the apple tree belonged to the neighbors. That's all the memories I have. Were you 3 years old then? No, Dave. I remember. I need to check the documents. You were probably sitting in front of a mirror, and that's why it seems to you that you had a sister. Who would separate twins? Think about it. That used to happen. Before, they would definitely send them to different regions in the army, but now they only send them together. Well, maybe you're right, Dave. Maybe you are, Jessica sighed. In any case, she, being paralyzed, couldn't do anything. Dave wrapped up his work quickly and hurried home. His colleagues suggested he stay and celebrate the successful handling of the accident, but Dave wanted to return as soon as possible. He was curious about how the girls were doing. "You're just like a family man," joked one of his colleagues. "Who knows, maybe it will turn out that way," Dave replied and hurried to catch the train. Something in his heart was restless. And when he returned home, he was taken aback by what he saw. When the girls were left alone, warmed up, and the morning passed, they began to look around. So, what do you think they did first? That's right, they went to where they were told not to go and took what they weren't supposed to take. "Let's go see the lady," suggested one sister. "Uncle said we shouldn't," replied the second. "But we'll just peek." "We won't touch anything," said the first. "Well, only if we just peek," the second agreed. This often happens with twins, one encourages the other to agree. It was the same with Kelly and Lilith. Lilith was quiet and calm, while Kelly was always looking for adventures, and not just for her own. The girls opened the door and cautiously poked their heads into the room. A woman lay on the bed, with high pillows under her head. They saw her and rushed to her. "Mom, Mommy. What are you doing here? Get up, let's go home." The girls hugged Jessica, cried, and kissed her hands and cheeks. But Jessica couldn't move. Where did these children come from? And why are they calling her mom? She didn't have children, she would remember that. And they were twin girls, too. The girls were crying, all "Mommy, Mommy." Jessica looked at them and felt as if she was looking in a mirror. She had a photograph like that, with her parents, a year after her adoption. "Girls, where are you from?" asked Jessica. "Mommy, get up." They kept repeating. But how could she get up? She made an effort, but it was all in vain. Then another. The girls cried. How she wanted to comfort them. And so they sat together on the bed until Dave returned. He came in and saw the scene. The girls were calling his wife Mom, and Jessica, upon seeing her husband, lifted herself up on one elbow. "Wow. This has never happened before, Dave." "I think I'm starting to feel my legs," said Jessica. "Why are these girls calling me Mom?" "Dave, they look like me as a child." Dave had already seen that the twins did indeed resemble his wife. He took an album with photographs from the shelf, the very photo Jessica had recalled. Both girls looked just like her. But how could they be her children? For years ago, he and Jessica had already been married and lived here. "Mom. Mom. Get up, let's go for a walk. Look at the sunshine," shouted the girls as they ran into Dave and Jessica's room. They had never woken up to the sound of children's cries before. It was a strange and unusual feeling in bed. "Help your wife, girls. Do you remember what your mom's name is?" "Lindsay." Mommy Lindsay, the girls replied. And this aunt's name is Jessica. No, she's not an aunt, she's our mom, shouted the girls, Kelly and Lilith. This aunt just looks like your mother, Dave began to explain, but the girls interrupted him. Here's the thing, Mom is a little sick and can't go out with you. Her legs hurt. So you go out and play by yourselves, but don't go far from the house, she said, smiling and extending her arms for a hug. The girls hugged Jessica and kissed her once. Okay, Mommy, they shouted, running out into the street. Jessica, what are you doing? Dave asked. How do you think I should handle this? You can see they can't hear you. I'm sure these are my sister's children. You urgently need to find out something. Otherwise, I'm going to go crazy. I think you have a day off. Please take care of this. Go to my adoptive parents, ask them where I was adopted. I'm begging you. Otherwise, I'll start to think that these are my children and that they came here from another dimension. Dave understood. He did everything his wife asked and found out that there really were twin girls in the orphanage, Jessica and Lindsay. These two girls were so different in character that if it weren't for their appearance, it would be hard to imagine they were sisters. Lindsay was adopted by a very wealthy couple. They liked that the girl was so energetic and persistent. They didn't want the second girl and said outright, "What are we supposed to do with this quiet one? That's not our temperament." But in still waters, devils dwell, said the adoptive mother. A small bribe resolved the matter. Lindsay went to a wealthy family. Meanwhile, the director of the orphanage didn't worry too much. There were candidates for the second girl who wanted a calm child. That's how Jessica ended up with her adoptive rural parents. Dave was in shock. He started searching further. A lot of time passed, and the girls lived with them all that time. They continued to call Jessica Mom. Jessica gradually asked the girls what they remembered about the day they ended up in the forest, but they couldn't really tell her much. They only said that their mom had put them in the car, taken them to the forest, asked them to sit for a little while, and then she would bring them ice cream. But time passed, and their mom never came back. And then Uncle Dave showed up. He came here, and it turned out that their mom. The girls thought that their mom had fallen, and that was why she hadn't come to get them. The child's mind works this way. When a child doesn't know something, they make up their own story based on their level of understanding. "Mom, where's our car?" asked one of the girls, the more observant one. "I don't know, maybe it left," said the girl and went to play. That was probably enough for her. At this point, Dave, in turn, traced Jessica's background, and what he discovered left him in shock. He had never seen such different fates for twin sisters. He conducted nearly a whole investigation. It turned out that Lindsay had grown up in a wealthy family. From a young age, she was quite the troublemaker. She didn't let her classmates rest and drove her teachers crazy. Unlike Jessica, Lindsay's adoptive parents revealed to her that she was adopted. Lindsay grew up unaware of anything, and her teachers prayed she would graduate from school quickly. There was no way to influence the girl. Her father was proud of her. He was glad she was growing up just like that. "She's just my copy," he would say. He was immensely pleased by all of Lindsay's mischief and whims. As a result, she grew up spoiled, capricious, and willful. When she got older, she dated boys however she wanted. And then she rushed into marriage. To say that her parents threw her the most extravagant wedding is an understatement. She was simply their beloved daughter. And Lindsay took both girls. She simply had no idea what to do with two children. "I didn't order two," Lindsay screamed. "Where did they come from?" There have never been any twins in our family. I wanted one child. Lindsay literally cried when she saw her girls and suffered immensely each time she had to feed or dress both of them. It was then that her parents decided to reveal the secret to her. They thought it would be for the best. They told her that she herself was a twin, so she shouldn't be upset. If she wanted to, they wouldn't mind her searching for her sister and having a relationship with her. But the effect of this news was completely the opposite. Lindsay didn't try to find anyone. On the contrary, she seemed to retreat into herself, made her husband hire a nanny, and simply stopped approaching the children. Then Lindsay threw herself into the gym, and it ended with her filing for divorce and severing ties with her ex-husband and the parents who had raised her. She didn't want anything to remind her of her past life. That's it, because Lindsay found herself a husband even richer than her previous one. Now she was only interested in money. There was just one problem. The new rich guy had absolutely no use for someone else's children, especially for duplicates, as he liked to joke about the twins. Is it that nature gave you a backup right away, just in case? He laughed. The girls were still little and didn't understand these jokes, and the new boyfriend insisted that Lindsay get rid of the kids if she wanted to continue her relationship with him. Well, then Dave figured out on his own that Lindsay had simply taken the girls to the woods and left them there to fend for themselves. When he told Jessica all this, she initially didn't believe it. Could she really have such a heartless and cruel sister? She thought. But the facts spoke for themselves. Jessica suggested to Dave that he keep the girls with him. He had already thought about it himself. But they couldn't just live with them without any documents. Something had to be done about it. Lindsay had to write a waiver for them. Jessica and Dave applied for guardianship. But there was just one problem. It was unlikely that the guardianship council would give the children to sick Jessica, and the girls' fate would be sealed. They would end up in an orphanage. A power of attorney could solve the problem. It's a document that parents usually prepare when sending a child on vacation with a grandmother or aunt. And few people know that this power of attorney can be drawn up until the child turns 18. It is arranged by a notary, doesn't cost much, and in case of any problems with the child regarding the law or health, the holder of such a power of attorney will be the official representative of the child in the absence of parents. What more could Jessica and Dave need in their situation? But how to convince Lindsay to sign the power of attorney? They would need to meet with her. However, Jessica had little idea of what that meeting would be like and didn't want to meet her, not because she was disabled, but because she knew from the girls' stories what nonsense their mother had done without any shame in front of the children. Now it seemed that the girls were beginning to suspect that Jessica wasn't exactly their mom, even though they still continued to call her mom. Jessica also knew that Lindsay would most likely ask for money in exchange, and if they gave in to her demands, she would keep asking for money all the time. And they had very little of it already. There was only one possible way left. Jessica herself needed to get on her feet and fight for custody of her nieces. And then fate intervened. One day, the girls decided to go for a walk. They didn't like to walk around the neighborhood. However, they had been strictly forbidden to go to the old mill. Well, you probably guessed it. As soon as you forbid a child something, it immediately becomes a coveted forbidden fruit for them. In the window of the house, Jessica saw the girls heading down the path that led to the old mill. She tried to call them from the window, but the wind was blowing the other way, and the girls didn't hear her. Jessica was tossing and turning in bed, unsure of what to do. Dave was at work at that time. The horror that had happened to her many years ago at the old mill returned from the depths of her subconscious. The images of what had happened and that disgusting bald man, all of it came rushing back in an instant. What if he was still at the mill? What if he still went there? Consciousness flickered, bringing Jessica back to the past. She remembered that terrible night she had unwillingly spent at the mill. Then that scoundrel simply threw her out of the window from quite a height. Here's what happened to Jessica. She had a compression fracture of the spine, and now her girls were heading there, possibly into the clutches of that bastard. Jessica gathered all her strength, all her will, lowered her legs from the bed, sat up, and then stood up. She took a few steps around the house and, of course, fell because her muscles were weak. She hadn't used her legs for several years. Jessica crawled out of the house, saw a rake at the door, tried to stand up again, and this time she succeeded. She realized that her spinal cord had healed, and now it was just a matter of training her muscles. Leaning on the rake, Jessica walked along the path and caught up with the girls right by the mill. Now this place had become even more horrific, covered in moss and ivy, with a repulsive appearance. It was unpleasant. Jessica returned home with the girls, and by the evening, she was waiting for her husband on her feet. Dave picked her up, started kissing her, and then pulled a chain from under his shirt, took off his wedding ring, and put it on his wife's finger. Now that you can walk, let everyone see that you're married. God forbid someone takes such a beauty away. Jessica quickly got back to normal, not without Dave's help, of course. Life in the village was such that there was no need for a gym. All the household chores were like a rehabilitation center. Bring water, chop wood, tend to the garden. What more could one want? So Jessica quickly got into shape. United, both sisters met at the court hearing regarding custody of the twins, Kelly and Lilith. This woman, standing on her own feet, would never have made anyone think that just recently she had been lying down and couldn't even speak, let alone take care of children. In the presence of the judge, Lindsay didn't dare to demand money from her sister, so she had to agree to hand over custody of the girls to Jessica for free. Dave hinted to Lindsay in the hallway that if she started yelling, it would get interesting. What did she expect, leaving them there? She asked. Lindsay said she thought they would be found by the camp counselors. They would have been the ones at fault then. Dave, his wife, and now their daughters left the courtroom as winners. Why did they part ways? Probably because of Jessica's quarrelsome nature. She lost everything: her husband, her parents, a happy family, and her daughters. But she realized and understood all this too late. As a result, Lindsay started drinking. Yes, unfortunately, this happens to women too. It's not just men who drown their sorrows. Quite often, she would get behind the wheel, to put it mildly, in an intoxicated state. Once, this ended tragically. Lindsay hit a person with her car. She understood what this could lead to. She urgently needed help, but she had no one, absolutely no one. There was no one to even call. Lindsay dialed Jessica's phone number. "It's your sister," she said. "Have you tried calling when you're sober?" Jessica asked. "Jessica, I hit someone." "I hope not to death." Jessica exclaimed in horror. "I don't know. I'm scared to approach him." "Then call an ambulance." "I can't." "Please come to me." Jessica could tell from her sister's voice that she was in despair. They had spent so little time together in childhood that they hardly remembered each other. They were so different with such different fates, yet the bond between twins hadn't disappeared. Jessica understood that if she didn't help her sister now, she might never get another chance. First of all, Jessica wouldn't have another chance to pull herself out of that swamp. This was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, the first and the last. Who else if not her? She arrived at the accident scene with Dave and was stunned when she saw the person Lindsay had hit. What a twist of fate, what a joker. What other surprises did fate have in store for the sisters? Lying on the grass was the very man who had dragged her into the old mill. The one who had caused her to be unable to have children and who had paralyzed her for several years. If it hadn't been for the girls and her husband Dave, she might still have been confined to bed, and that man, that bald bastard, was still alive. How Jessica wanted to get behind the wheel of her sister's car and speed off at full throttle, but that would be too generous a gift. Jessica asked her husband to go home and trust her. She called the police and an ambulance. Who was driving? The officer asked. I was, Jessica replied without hesitation. What are you doing? Asked her astonished sister. Be quiet. This is the first and last time. Swear that you'll stop drinking and get your act together. I swear. Lindsay replied. Jessica didn't really believe that oath and, hand on heart, she just really wanted to be at least a little involved in this incident so that bald bastard would know that it was she who had taken her revenge. As Jessica had anticipated, Lindsay received a suspended sentence, while that scoundrel remained paralyzed for life. Now he would attend her school, now he would know what it felt like. Surprisingly, Lindsay got her act together, well, as much as she could. Now she occasionally came to the village to see her sister. Hooray, Aunt Lindsay has come. The girls greeted her. Be careful, don't stain my new dress, she would tell them. Tell me, sister, Jessica asked her one day. Do you regret anything? I do, Lindsay replied. I regret that we didn't know each other sooner. And also, Jessica continued, I tried to tell the girls that you lost them. Absolutely not, Lindsay replied. Well, just think about it. What kind of mother am I? What can I teach them? No, no, no. What was I made for? To be their aunt. Maybe they just mixed something up there in heaven. We look alike, and they handed them to me, then fixed the situation. So enjoy motherhood to your heart's content, it's not for me. Would you like to be an aunt again, but for real this time? Jessica asked. In what sense? Her sister didn't understand. Literally. I'm pregnant. It looks like I'm having twins. You're the first one to know about it. The sisters burst into tears and hugged. Thus, justice prevailed. Jessica gave birth to twins, just like her sister, only this time boys. Dave was on cloud 9. Now, finally, he could leave his job in the city and return to his beloved occupation, forestry. Moreover, not just one successor was growing up, but two. There would be someone to pass on the wisdom of the forest.